Welcome to Dustin Cathro Book Reviews.
Welcome back, fellow Nerdlings. Today we are joining Geralt of Rivia in The Witcher, The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski, a Polish author who has become renowned and famous since a long time. But since Netflix made the show, boom, the series has blown up and it is awesome. I'm going to tell you all about it. The pros, the cons, the good, the bad, the ugly, all the things. Okay, so in The Last Wish, Geralt of Rivia, aka The Witcher, he's unlike any of the other Witchers. There's all these connotations in the book where Witchers are like vagabonds, they're wanderers and peddlers and thieves. But Geralt of Rivia is different. He's a famous character in the book. Like, people know who Geralt is because he's capable of things that no other Witcher is capable of. And not just that, but he's also deep and philosophical and has all these moral obligations. So something that's actually really interesting about Geralt specifically, and he says this in the book, is that he kind of makes his own Witcher code. He talks about that's against the Witcher code, but the Witchers make their own code. So, if Nietzsche heard that, he'd really like that. That's a real Nietzschean idea, to become your own man or to make your own rules in essence. Okay, so The Witcher, The Last Wish is the first book of the series in chronological order. And so this first book, it can kind of be different at times than a typical novel that most people would read, because this novel is kind of a bunch of short stories, and they're almost like quest chapters. Like, each chapter, Geralt is fulfilling a quest, and so you should expect not to know really what the hell's going on in the book. There's all these monsters and characters, and you're just like, who are all these people? And you get this sense that Geralt knows a lot about these different types of monsters, and he's kind of an expert. And a lot of common folk, even in the books, they don't really know what these monsters are called. And the Witcher, it's his job to eliminate these monsters. And so he's kind of going through the first few chapters of this book, and he's slaying these monsters in a variety of different ways and a variety of different monsters. And so this book originally was being released in a magazine, from my understanding, chapter by chapter. So like a short story by short story, the adventures of Geralt, essentially. But The Last Wish actually was a post-production of The Sword of Destiny, which actually came out before it. But if you want to read the Witcher series, you got to start with The Last Wish and then go to The Sword of Destiny. So just to make that clear, yes, start with The Last Wish, despite it being the second book written. There's a few beefs I have with the book, and one of them actually is that there's all these monsters and people that you have no idea who they are, and there's no backstory to them or leading up to them. Geralt just knows these people, and you can tell where you start in the book, he has a history with these people, and he's met them before, and they've heard of him, a lot of people. And so you kind of get this idea that Geralt's this very famous Witcher who has a lot of ties to wizards and kings and queens and a bunch of other powerful people. And so despite not knowing what led up to his infamy, let's call it, you just get to see the result of whatever built up to where he is in The Last Wish, which is a bunch of short stories. So it's a little bit annoying because you don't know the backstory to a bunch of things, but it also gives you some intrigue for the future books and the future reads on exactly what's happening. But The Last Wish really shows you the kind of character Geralt is, and I guess what he could be. Something cool that's in The Last Wish, and something that's very key and important in the TV series that is on Netflix, is that Sintra is mentioned in a chapter, and you get to know the history essentially of what led Geralt to Ciri. And so I'm not going to reveal too much as a spoiler, but you kind of get to see how that unfolds and how that kind of goes with this theme of destiny in The Witcher. And so The Witcher has this theme that destiny is something you can't change, and this idea of free will, it doesn't really exist in The Witcher. And this is something that I'm actually quite passionate about because I myself sort of believe in destiny more than free will. And the free will essentially is just this illusion that you think you are making all these choices, but actually it's very predictable, let's call it. And so The Witcher accepts his destiny, and no matter what he does, destiny will lead the way. So it's kind of an interesting concept, I think, and I'd be curious to talk to the author to see what he actually thinks about free will and destiny as a concept. There's one chapter in The Last Wish that I really like, and it's kind of this old school fairy tale feel, and it's when Geralt is trying to chase away the Sylvan named Torque, but it ends up that him and Dandelion, they get captured by the elves and they kind of get beat up a bit, and Torque actually saves their lives despite Geralt trying to like chase him out of town on the edge of the world. And I think that is very interesting idea that, you know, Torque's like this little devil type character, like classic kind of fantasy trope devil character that Geralt tries chasing away, and he helps them in the end because he doesn't want any blood on his hands, which kind of shows what kind of creature the Sylvan is. He's kind of like this sophisticated creature that doesn't want this murder on his hands because he likes his life and he doesn't want the villagers to like get rid of him or chase him away. So I thought that was an interesting kind of concept, and how it made the elves seem real shady and really bad, right? And during that chapter as well, Geralt gets into these deep philosophical arguments with the elves and how they're just trying to kill them because they feel bad about themselves, and it's the only power that they have is to hurt Geralt and Dandelion. I thought that was an interesting idea because Geralt tries to rationalize with the elves and tries to tell them that they need to make peace with the humans and make like an alliance instead of stealing from them, and that it's not sustainable and that there's no honor in doing what they're doing, and they need to adapt. And the old way that they used to live, they can't live like that anymore, clearly, because they're stealing just to survive in the cold hard mountains that they've kind of been pushed to on the edge of the world. And so Gerald's kind of actually giving them some really good advice to like make amends, and you know, and they're kind of like, oh, we don't want to join the colonizers, kind of thing is their approach. But really, the voice of reason, as a lot of the chapters are called, is Geralt saying like, it's okay to meet in the middle somewhere, and to mend and to adapt and to change, because to stay the same means death. And that becomes very clear in the conversation that Geralt has with the elven leader. I think a part that makes Geralt so exceptional as a character and as a Witcher is that there is this kind of human part to him. There's this humane part to him, you know, like he wants to do what's right, and sometimes he's not very good at that, but his heart's always in the right place, and he's always trying to do what's right, and he's always trying to not get too intertwined in the politic of things, and also he's not wanting to be a part of hurting innocent people. He's really just trying to do what's in his power to do the best thing possible for kind of the world or the realm that we want to call it. And so I think that's something that we should definitely consider him as a character, that he has these deep moral underpinnings that he kind of tries to live up to. Even though sometimes he doesn't, and he fails on his own accords in all sorts of ways, but he's always trying very hard to live up to those expectations of himself. Something that we have to talk about too is the Djinn, or the genie in the book. Because by some weird twist of fate, or destiny, as we might call it, Geralt finds himself intertwined with Yennefer. So, Dandelion, he gets hurt from the genie, and Geralt has no choice but to take him to the closest city, and the only sorceress that's available is Yennefer. And so he goes to her, and this is where it kind of gets confusing, because sometimes I'm like, does Geralt even know that he has the genie's wishes? Yennefer is really interested in this genie, or this Djinn, that the Witcher and also Dandelion had come across. And if you kind of know the Witcher story based on the TV series and stuff, you know that Yen, and in the earlier chapters of The Last Wish, she really wishes that she could have a child. And that's because she lost that ability during the process when she changed herself, when she became a sorceress. And so that was the cost of her transforming her body, was that she cannot reproduce. And so in the back of my mind, when I'm reading this, I'm always thinking like, oh, does Yennefer want to use the genie to make a wish so that she's able to have a child? Or does she want to capture the genie, like the priest was theorizing, to have and use it for some ultimate power, or to cast some sophisticated or powerful spells? And so we don't really know her exact motives, but we speculate, and my speculation, just by this book alone, is that she actually wants the Djinn so that she can make a wish so that she can bear a child. But she doesn't know that Geralt actually has the wishes. The third wish is this, it's kind of confusing because they're not very clear in the book, but he ties his destiny or his life to Yennefer's in this really impulsive, kind of passionate love thing that happens between them in this very short time they spent together. And so Geralt ties his fate with Yennefer. And Yennefer is kind of caught off guard by this, like, why would you do this? And I don't think Geralt even knows himself. He just, he's got the goo-goo eyes on. Okay, so just a disclaimer, so I don't get any slack from any of the big Witcher fans out there. I know that these were all written as short stories, but this book has a weakness where it doesn't have an antagonist. There's just not one. There's a couple of bad monsters he kills, and there's no deep antagonist or anything. He just is like, yep, slaying monsters, doing his like spells and stuff. And there's not really an antagonist. There's just like Geralt versus himself, which maybe there's something to that actually. Is it Geralt versus himself? Geralt's kind of this nihilist in a way. He has these deep philosophical thoughts and whatnot, but then he has these inconsistent, nihilistic kind of moments where he's not really sure what the meaning to his life is. He's always out seeking his next thing. He's trying to be a Witcher, but you have this sense, I feel like, this underlying tone in the book that Geralt wants to be more than a Witcher. He's kind of a philosopher or something, He just does the witching, let's call it, for coin. He's just trying to make a living. He's trying to survive, and he doesn't really know any other way to do it. But I don't think he's happy about it. I think he would love to find some other way to make the money, but he has this call to duty as the Witcher, I guess, and we don't really know how old Geralt is in The Last Wish. We don't really have an idea. How long has he been around? He's a mutant. He has magical powers and aptitudes. Is he 100 years old? Is he 30 years old? Is he 50? We don't know. We don't know because magic and mutations are in the way, but he looks, he's tired and exhausted of being a witcher, I think. But he's been around the block, because he's kind of famous in the book and he knows all these people. Piggybacking more on that idea of Geralt having this like hopelessness kind of about him and in his life, or some nihilistic kind of undertones. I think when he meets Yennefer, that this gives him this new meaning to his life, and that's why he does this crazy thing and makes this wish that joins their fates together. Kind of impulsively, but also it's like he's been waiting for something like that to happen to him. And that he's really caught off guard by his emotions overcoming him, despite all his Witcher training, that I'm sure they beat it out of him and whatnot, but there's still this like very human part to him that makes these rash decisions, which is probably why he really likes Dandelion as a friend, because Dandelion is just like hard on the sleeve, going for it, and not making bad decisions left, right, and center. And I think Geralt really is inspired by that in some sense. That's why he loves having Dandelion around, I'm pretty sure, because he's like, Dandelion is really living a very human life, and I think it helps Geralt feel like he could be more human, because I think that he really struggles with being different and being a mutant. It's like when the elves were talking to him when they caught him in the later chapter as well with the Sylvan and stuff, is that the elves are saying how they're different and they don't fit in, and the humans will hate them, but Geralt never said to them that he is different too, and he understands that there's some beef with regular people and witchers and regular people and elves, but he never really says that, because the elves are so caught up in their own thing that they don't even see that Geralt himself is different, and he doesn't fit into society either, and he's just trying to make amends with that too. So there's kind of these like deep ideas and thoughts behind The Witcher, and which I really appreciate that, and it kind of like gets you thinking about even things in your own everyday life, right? Okay, guys, just get your copy today. The Witcher: The Last Wish, Geralt of Rivia. Join him on his quests. It's an amazing book series that will be immortalized in the fantasy genre. Alright guys, till next time, thank you very much. Dustin Gathro here. Stay tuned, another book review coming up soon. Keep reading.